You know, disasters can feel like something that just happens on the news, right? To other people, far away. But what if I told you the real key to safety isn't about just hoping it never happens to you, but actually understanding it? Let's dive in and see how we can turn that feeling of helplessness into real, practical preparedness.
Okay, so let's kick things off with a question that sounds simple but is actually super important. What really is the difference between a hazard and a disaster? We kind of toss these words around, but believe me, knowing the difference is where our power to get ready truly begins.
All right, so here's the breakdown. A hazard is the threat. It's the potential for something bad to happen. Think of it like the giant storm cloud gathering on the horizon. A disaster, on the other hand, is when that threat becomes a reality. It's not just the chance of rain, it's the actual flash flood that sweeps through a town. See the difference? One is a warning, the other is the event itself.
Okay, so why are we splitting hairs here? Why does this distinction matter so much? Well, let's ground this in the real world. If you look at a country like India, the entire landscape is just filled with these potential hazards, and understanding them is the absolute first step in stopping them from becoming full-blown disasters.
Check this out, 55%. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That's how much of India's land is vulnerable to earthquakes. We're talking more than half the country living with this constant underlying threat. It's a massive number. And that's not all. On top of that, you've got 12% of the land that's vulnerable to floods. So we're not just dealing with one type of hazard here. We're talking about multiple, overlapping risks that communities have to face every single year.
And to round out the picture, another 8% of the land is vulnerable to cyclones. So when you start adding all this up, you see a country where these hazards aren't some rare freak occurrence. They're a constant reality. And that is why getting the difference between a hazard and a disaster isn't just an academic exercise, it's literally a matter of life and death.
But here's the thing, not all disasters come from Mother Nature. In fact, we can pretty much split them into two major buckets, and understanding the difference is, well, it's crucial.
So, on one side you have your natural disasters. You know the ones, earthquakes, floods, cyclones. But on the other side you have man-made disasters. And what's wild here is the cause. It's not a force of nature. It's something to do with us. Human activity, technical screw-ups, or sometimes just plain negligence. Things like industrial accidents or massive oil spills can be just as devastating as any hurricane.
A truly heartbreaking but really powerful example of this is the Bhopal gas tragedy. This wasn't some random act of nature, no. It was a catastrophic failure of a management system. It was a direct result of human error and negligence. It's a very stark reminder that some of the absolute worst disasters are the ones we bring on ourselves.
All right, so we're up against threats from nature and from human error. So what do? How do we possibly prepare for all of this? The answer isn't to just sit back and wait to react when something bad happens. The smart approach is to be proactive, using a framework that experts call the disaster management cycle.
So what exactly is disaster management? Well, you can think of it like a master plan. It's all about getting your resources organized and figuring out who's responsible for what before an emergency even happens. And the whole goal is simple, to make the impact of a disaster as small as possible.
And there's a really good reason we call it a cycle. It's not a straight line with a beginning and an end. It's a continuous loop. As you can see here, what we do before, during, and after disaster all connects. And most importantly, everything we learn from one disaster helps us get even better prepared for the next one.
So, where do we start? The first phase is what we call mitigation. This is all about playing the long game. It's the work we do to reduce risk before a threat even shows up on the radar. This means doing things like studying where we're most vulnerable, teaching the public what to do, and, identifying and strengthening weak buildings before the ground starts to shake.
All right, next up, we have preparedness. Now, if mitigation is about reducing the risk, preparedness is about being ready for the risk you just can't get rid of. This is where you make your action plans, you run emergency drills, and you set up early warning systems. It's all about giving people a heads up and a clear plan for what to do.
Then comes phase 3, response. This is go time. This is when the disaster is actually happening. It's all about immediate action on the ground. We're talking search and rescue teams, getting emergency supplies to people, and providing first aid. This is the moment where all that preparation really pays off.
And last but certainly not least, we have recovery. This phase can go on for months, sometimes even years after the crisis is over. It's the long, hard road back to some sense of normal. It means providing temporary housing, getting financial aid to families, and making sure people have long-term medical care. It's about helping a community truly get back on its feet.
Okay, so that's the big picture strategy, but let's bring it right down to our level. What does being prepared actually look like for you and me day to day? Let's talk about a few simple steps that can literally save lives. In an earthquake, what you do in those first few seconds is absolutely critical. Your main job is to protect yourself from anything that could fall. If you're inside, get under a heavy desk or table and stay away from glass windows. If you're outside, get to an open area, away from buildings and power lines. And honestly, just as important, try to stay calm and help others do the same. Panic can be a real danger all on its own.
And what about floods? Well, with floods, prevention is really a team sport for the whole community. This goes right back to that mitigation phase we talked about earlier. It means things like having strict rules against deforestation, which can make flooding worse. It means building strong riverbanks and, crucially, having evacuation plans and shelters ready to go way before the water even starts to rise.
But look, no matter how well we plan, disasters can still strike. And when they do, that recovery phase kicks in. And while government agencies and big organizations are crucial, the real, true power of recovery comes from the community itself. Every single one of us has a role to play.
So what can you personally do to help? There are so many real, tangible ways to make a difference. Donating to trusted organizations is huge. It gets money and resources to the experts on the ground fast. You could organize a fundraiser, send essential supplies to people you know in the affected areas, or give blood. That's a simple act that directly saves lives.
And this is maybe the most important thing to remember from all of this. We see the big agencies on the news, but in any disaster, the real first responders are always the community. It's neighbors helping neighbors in those first few critical minutes and hours. The community is always the first line of defense and support.
So, at the end of the day, being prepared for a disaster isn't just about having a go bag packed by the door. It's about building a culture of awareness and support right where you live. It's about knowing your neighbors, having a plan together, and all of us working toward a safer, more secure future.
So, I'll leave you with a question to chew on. What's one small thing your community, your street, your building, your town could do this week to become just a little more prepared? It doesn't have to be some huge project, just one small step. Think about it. Thanks for tuning in.